Recognizing the member for Chilliwack North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So let's start by talking about what Bill 13 is and what it isn't. We've seen support for this bill from organizations like CEJA, and I would encourage everyone here to read their press release and understand why they feel this legislation is necessary. Their concerns are real. The fear and the rise in anti-Semitism that Jewish communities are experiencing today is real, and it's serious. But as the opposition, it is our responsibility to look beyond support, beyond headlines, and beyond intention, and ask a very simple question. Does this bill actually solve the problem that it claims to address? Because if it does not, then we are not doing our job. In order to battle anti-Semitism and hostilities around other faith groups, we must look to the root of the problem that Jewish people have faced for hundreds of years, and that is tolerance for hatred against them. Hatred has been ignored, it has been excused, and at times it has been justified. History has shown us very clearly where that leads. Now, in this day and age, this is no longer something that only Jewish people are facing. This is something that also Christians are now experiencing. We've seen this recently with the federal Bill C9. This newest iteration of legislation has raised serious concerns because it promotes, in effect, hostility towards both Jews and Christians in what we refer to as Judeo-Christian values. We know this is not speculation because a federal minister explicitly named 3 books of the Bible that he considers to be hate speech in justifying his bill. So all that to say, as a Christian, I stand in solidarity with the Jewish community. We have seen what persecution has done, especially during the Second World War, and we cannot allow ourselves to go down that path again. Jewish people must not be persecuted for who they are as a people, and they must not be persecuted for their religious beliefs. Now, perhaps this bill is well-intentioned by the government. Perhaps they truly believe, and as we have heard, they do believe that this is the solution, or the beginning of the solution, to the increasing number of attacks on Jewish people. And if that is the case, then I will say this: I applaud that effort. But effort is not the same as effectiveness, because all we need to do is look at what happened with the Safe Access to Schools Act. That legislation came about after a large-scale protest, particularly from parents and citizens who disagreed with SOGI 123. And what did the government do? They decided to create safe access zones around the schools, effectively limiting the ability of parents and taxpayers to express their concerns. Although that bill was presented as a way to protect children, what it actually did was censor people who disagreed with government policy. And in many cases, a lot of those people were the parents themselves. And now we're seeing the same approach again. Bill 13 proposes to create protective zones around places of worship. But we have to ask, what does that actually accomplish? Does it prevent anti-Semitism? Does it stop violence? Does it reduce the need for synagogues to spend $100,000 every month on private security due to the risk of terrorism? The answer is obvious. It does not. It is quite simply paying lip service to safety. Because putting up a barrier does not stop someone who is intent on doing harm. We know this. We have seen school shootings. We have seen acts of terror. We have seen violence carried out in spite of every effort to create safe zones. In Canada and BC, we have seen churches burned to the ground. The last one was in Burns Lake. That was in December this past year. To suggest that drawing a boundary around a place of worship will prevent arson or destruction is simply not grounded in reality. So what are the actual issues that are creating the need to protect places of worship? We don't have to look far. Every single Saturday, there is a pro-Palestinian protest on the front lawn of this legislature. And within those protests, we hear calls for Israel to be removed from the map. That is anti-Semitism. At the same time, we have one of our largest unions, the BCTF, in this province endorsing boycotts against Israel in solidarity with that movement. So we have to ask, isn't that hate speech? Don't we already have laws against that? Because here's the point. Restricting where people can protest does not change what they are saying. And it does not eliminate hatred. And it certainly does not solve the problem. So what is the solution? The solution is not new legislation that limits where people can stand. The solution is enforcing the laws we already have. We already have laws against hate speech. We already have laws against inciting violence. We already have laws against destruction of property and terrorism. So let's empower the RCMP and law enforcement to enforce those laws. We heard this morning that the RCMP have not increased their numbers since 2012. That's a problem. So let's support them in doing their job without infringing on the rights and freedoms that are protected under the Canadian Charter. Because in reality, this bill flies in the face of that charter. One of the most troubling aspects of this bill, just like the Safe Access to Schools Act, and similar to the federal Bill C9, is the expansion of police powers. This bill allows for individuals to be arrested without a warrant based on what is described as reasonable grounds. That is a significant shift because now we are no longer dealing strictly with clear violations of the law. We are dealing with subjective interpretation, and that should terrify us. And it gets worse because the bill also allows action to be taken against someone who is considered likely to contravene the law. Not someone who has done something wrong, but somebody who might. This introduces the concept of a potential crime. And on the face of it, that should concern every single one of us, because that is a dangerous precedent for us to set. We are placing an enormous burden on law enforcement. Police officers are now expected to act not just on evidence, but on judgment, on interpretation, on what they believe might happen. And the officers I've spoken to want no part of that. They want clarity, they want objectivity, they want to enforce the law as it exists, not to be put in a position where they must interpret intent. There is also inconsistency in this bill. Unions, for example, are affected in the same way. They are not affected in the same way. They are allowed to picket within these zones because their activities fall under what is considered prescribed. So again, we have to ask, if this is about safety, why are there exceptions? Why are some groups allowed to operate within these zones while others are not? As His Majesty's loyal opposition, it is our job to look at this bill and every other bill objectively. And what we are saying is this: this bill will not accomplish what the title suggests. It will not achieve what organizations like CEJA are hoping it will achieve. It is at best a well-intentioned attempt, but it is not the solution, because it does not address the root of the problem. It does not stop anti-Semitism, it does not stop violence, it does not stop churches from being burned down, and it does not remove the need for costly security measures. What it does do is create the appearance of action. It allows the government to say they have done something, but in reality, it is virtue signaling. This bill needs to go deeper. It needs to address the root of the problem, and that starts with enforcing the laws that already exist. Nothing is more sacred than the freedom to worship and the freedom to speak. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is very clear. Everyone has the fundamental freedom of conscience and religion, thought, belief, opinion and expression, peaceful assembly, and association. These are not suggestions, Madam Speaker. These are rights. And while this bill claims to protect access to places of worship, that has never been the core issue. The core issue is safety. The issue is violence. The issue is hatred. And those laws are addressed not by restricting space, but by enforcing the law. So I will say this to government in conclusion: this is a nice try. It's a great attempt, but this isn't it. We owe it to the Jewish communities, we owe it to people of faith, we owe it to every Canadian to do better than this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.